We're in Way Media.
Night, Mr. Walters.
You see that guy over there? Now, he's an actor. The guy on the phone, he's a prize fighter. Me, I'm a cab driver. I'm the only cab driver in this place.
Good evening and welcome to Night, Mr. Walters, a taxi podcast. I am HP, your co-host, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Father Malone. Father Malone, how are you this evening?
I'm good. I'm glad to be back. It's been a while. I don't have anything jokey to say.
It has been a while, but it's, as always, I'm looking forward to talking taxi with you. This week, we're getting into Season 2, Episode 5, The Reluctant Fighter. This was written by Ken Eston and directed by James Burrows. Interesting little tidbit. Are you familiar with Ken Eston, Father Malone?
I know the name from somewhere. I think I've seen it in many, many television series.
So this was his first episode written for Taxi. He was later to become a Taxi co-producer before going on to become the Emmy-winning co-creator of the Tracey Ullman Show.
Ah, that thing, yes.
This was the launching pad for what became a rather storied career, so that's kind of cool. Reminder, we're doing these shows in broadcast order and not in order of filming. First shot we see of this episode is our wonderful B-roll. It's sunrise over New York City as the Twin Towers dominate the skyline to the left. And this particular shot, I don't know about you, Father Malone, but it reminded me of the old days on television before there was cable TV, where TV stations would have special broadcast packages in the morning for when the start of the broadcast day began. And then at the end of the night, they would play the Star Spangled Banner and whatever. This looked like, hey, this is the start of a new day. Welcome to NBC. This made me feel instantly nostalgic because that's like a lot of things, that's sort of a lost piece of our childhood, if you will. And then we cut to a daytime shot. This is B-roll after B-roll.
He's telling a very good story here because we get a shot of the Manhattan skyline with the sun coming up, and the Twin Towers are basically the focal point of that. And then we cut to B-roll on the street a little bit later in the morning, you can tell by the sunlight. Twin Towers, pan down to the cabs, and then we cut inside the cab, and then we're returning to Sunshine Cab. So Burrows has taken just a bunch of B-roll. He's like Ed Wood. I can make a whole lot out of this stock footage.
I noticed that too, that we start at this wide shot of the skyline, and then we zoom in, and we have a point of reference for the Twin Towers now. And as you said, we cut to this over-the-shoulder shot from inside the cab as they're driving past a Gulf gas station going into the garage.
The whole thing, by the way, is scored by Christopher Cross. It was sort of insane.
It starts off, it's very mellow. It has like flutes, and it gives you this feeling of the city waking up. And then, boy, it gets peppy, and it's like Ride Like the Wind. Yeah.
Certainly a lot of piano on Taxi for some reason.
There's a lot. I don't know if you noticed, as we're gliding into the garage from inside the cab, we catch a quick glimpse of the gas prices. Did you see what the price per gallon was? You didn't notice this?
Is it like 30 cents?
No, it was 68 cents per gallon, which is still ridiculous.
Is it? Not now.
Well, what I'm saying is compared to today's prices now, and this time in 2024, gas prices here in Massachusetts are hovering around $3.50 per gallon. What are they in Vegas right now?
$3.50. They're over $4 here.
Yeah, that's great. But back then it was 68 cents per gallon. It's crazy.
That's 40 years ago.
And we'll get a little bit into the economics of the situation a little later on in this episode. But for now, we will. Not gas prices, but we'll talk. We'll get to it when we get to it. We cut inside the garage where an older gent in a newsboy cap strides over to Louie's cage asking for Tony Banta, the boxer. And of course, it's a vaudevillian thing. This is, we love vaudeville here. Louie retorts, how about Tony Banta, the bum? Vaudeville. And he points out where Tony's hanging out at the card table, of course. Who is this mustachioed gentleman, Father Malone?
Okay, the character is Vince, who is a guy from the gym, but he's played by Michael Gazzo, who I think most people know from Godfather 2. He played Frankie Pentangeli. Your father didn't trust Hyman Roth. That guy, right? And he was a major character actor. He was on every television series. He was in like tons and tons of movies, but also was a playwright. He wrote Hatful of Rain on Broadway.
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was a playwright beforehand. He wrote King Creole, Elvis Presley's best movie.
Oh, I had no idea.
King Creole, one of the trio of good Elvis Presley movies. Those are King Creole, Fun in Acapulco, and Roustabout. Those are the three. Because Elvis has three personas: charming guy, prick, and then a combination of the both. In this film, it's charming Elvis.
The piece of trivia that I love about his casting in The Godfather 2, which he was, by the way, he was Oscar nominated for playing Frankie Pentangeli. But the legend goes that Richard Castellano, who played Clemenza, of course, from Godfather 1, that he was fired for demanding to write his own lines and he wanted a large pay increase. So originally it was supposed to be Clemenza that goes against the family and testifies against them, but exit Richard Castellano, enter Michael Gazzo, who, as I just said, was Oscar nominated for his effort.
What a fuck up on Richard Castellano's part, right? I mean, yes, get the pay increase, but don't insist on writing your dialogue. That's what turned Coppola off. That's what got him fired. And then Bruno Kirby turns around and he gives a fucking phenomenal performance as the younger him in the same film, the young Clemenza. So obvious that was supposed to be Clemenza and not Frankie Pentangeli. However, Michael Gazzo is fucking awesome in Godfather 2. He was nominated for an Academy Award.
Side note, by the way, you already said the character's name is Vince. As Vince is walking over to Tony at the card table, we see that the cabbies are engaged in a spirited game of chess. This is a first on Taxi. They're excitedly huddled. I think Elaine is basically playing Alex in a game of chess, this little portable chessboard. And Tony and Bobby are watching. It looks like a commercial for some board game on television. I could only think maybe Alex had another crisis of his gambling problem, and so they had to stop playing cards for a while. What did you think?
I didn't think that. I just thought, here's what I thought. One day they came in and they all sat down and they took out the cards, and Elaine Nardo said, "Are we really just going to play poker again? Is there nothing else we can do? Do we not have an education?" And then the next day, suddenly there was a chess set on the thing, anonymously left there, but we all know it was Alex. Let me rewind for a minute, HP. When Vince walks in, I don't know if you noticed. So Vince walks in, he's got one of these big old slouch sweaters on, and he's wearing a little scally cap, right? And as he's walking in, there's a guy walking out who's the same height as him, the same former hair as him. He's dressed in black, but he's also got the same scally cap on. And I think this is a moment of Vince meeting his younger self.
So this is like Back to the Future. Maybe Iggy is actually Doc Brown and he's gone back in time.
Maybe Iggy is Doc Brown. Iggy is Doc Brown. Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. Reverend Jim has been noticeably absent these past couple of episodes, and that it's clearly because he's been in California, and he's got his fright wig on, and he's performing the part of Doc Brown simultaneously, and also doing experiments with people around the garage because Vince has a doppelganger running around, a younger him.
I try to stay more in touch with the background actors because you always pull something really fun out of it that I clearly missed. And this is another good example of that. So I'll have to watch that again. Tony eagerly greets Vince and introduces him around as Vince from the gym. Like you said, he's probably a trainer or something. And Vince tells Tony that he has something personal that he wants to discuss. And the rest of the cabbies announce they're going to go to breakfast, which is their way of just clearing the garage so they can have this personal two-person scene. And Tony says he'll meet them later. And they sit at the table, and Vince tells Tony that Benny Foster wants to come out of retirement. From Tony's incredulous reply, it sounds like Benny is a former champ who's likely washed up, but he's making a comeback. And here's where we get another vaudeville moment. Tony bemoans the fact that Foster has to fight an unknown, and how low will he sink?
He wants to fight you.
Vaudeville.
That's low. Get the hook.
Yeah. By the way, side note, we have a Tony weird seating alert. Now we've seen Tony, he likes to turn the chairs backwards. He'll hop on the back of the cab's fender, whatever. He goes to get coffee as they continue their discussion. And instead of sitting at the bench in front of the coffee machine, like a normal person, he straddles the bench with one leg on either side. What did you make of that, Father Malone?
Par for the course. In fact, I didn't even notice it. I'm so used to him having to sit irregularly around the cab company. I'm surprised he didn't jump up on top of the candy machine.
Perch on top of it like a raven.
Yeah. Just like run up the wall and then like drop down onto it. So what's going on, Vince?
There's some additional hacky back and forth between the lunkhead Banta and the equally addled Vince. I actually think, I don't know if you had this impression, but as the episode wore on, I couldn't help thinking that Vince was kind of a precursor to Coach Pantuso from Cheers.
No, he's not ditzy enough.
He is, though, because at one point later on, he says to Tony, "Oh, with your brain and my brawn, we're going to go far, kid." And then Tony, of course, has to say, "I think you had that reversed, Vince." And Vince goes, "Of course." Vaudeville. To me, that's a Coach moment.
Yeah, you're right. But this is Ken Eston writing this one. The Charles brothers are just there.
Their discussion convinces Tony that this would actually be a great opportunity for him. Shades of the movie Rocky, Vince asks to be Tony's manager, and they agree with a handshake. And as Vince leaves the garage, Tony lets out this joyful scream to a conspicuously empty garage. It's weird. There's nobody in the garage. Maybe all of the day shift cabbies have already gone, but there's nobody there. And Tony declares to himself he needs to tell someone or he'll bust. But the only person he runs into is Louie, which quells his excitement immediately, and we cut the commercial. Now, here's another side note. Louie is walking in from stage right. He's carrying a newspaper. It's implied that he's returning from taking a shit in the bathroom, is it not?
Pretty much, yeah.
I don't know. I just found that
anything
funny.
to add to that other than, a little bit of reality creeping into Taxi.
Yeah, nothing wrong with that. I just thought it was kind of funny. We cut to an exterior of a cab parked smack dab in front of a gym, and the marquee reads, "Bobby Gleason's Gymnasium," which proudly advertises group or private boxing lessons. Now, this is actually a real gym, Father Malone. I did a little bit of research, and this is a real gym located on the Brooklyn waterfront. It was originally in Manhattan, but it later moved to Brooklyn. It was founded by former bantamweight fighter Pete Gagliardi, who changed his name to Bobby Gleason for reasons known only to himself.
Was it in Manhattan when they filmed it?
That's a good question. I don't know when it moved. I suspect, actually, it could have been. It's been around forever. I think it's been around for many, many years. Even by this point, I think Hilary Swank, there was some connection. She might have trained in this gym for $1 Million Baby. It's fairly well known, but I don't know when they moved to Brooklyn. It would track if they were in Manhattan, would it not?
I would think so, but maybe not. Maybe it's easier to shoot in Brooklyn.
Could be. And they might have made the trek. The cabbies might have made the trek to Brooklyn. Who knows? So Burroughs, again, he's full of tricks with his direction. He zooms in on the window of the gym, and we have a match cut inside the gym, and it's filled with boxers of every shape and size. They're working out, they're getting trained, and what have you. And in walks Elaine, Tony, Bobby, and Alex, ever supportive for Tony. And Nardo is leading the way in a spectacular hot pink top under a lavender sport coat with matching suspenders. What did you think of this outfit?
I wrote yowza. I thought the pants were ill-fitting, but I don't care because anytime Elaine Nardo is in a skin-tight shirt with suspenders, there's nothing better on God's green earth.
It was remarkable. And then Tony actually looks great too. They're there for a press conference to announce this fight, and he's in a nice he's got like a sport coat. He's got an open collar shirt, no tie. He looks very easy breezy. And Alex, of course, just looks schlubby as usual. He's got a polo shirt and a members only jacket, which is his stock in trade. But then it's hard to describe what Bobby's wearing. He's got this jacket that it's sort of orange, and it's made of this.
Yeah,
go ahead.
A bizarro semi-transparent orange slipcover.
I thought it looked like parachute material, very sheer material.
Oh, yeah. It made no sense at all, other than we're creeping into the 80s where, for some reason, there was a flirtation with plastic see-through clothing for about 5 minutes.
I kind of admire the fearlessness with which they continue to dress Jeff Conaway for this show, because you would think they would just put him in his stock and trade leather jacket and jeans and what have you, but they do have a knack for putting him in odd outfits here and there, and this is no exception.
It makes me think that Bobby Wheeler has looked at himself in the mirror one too many times wearing that jeans and leather jacket combo and went, what color shirt am I going to wear? You know what? I'm going to try something different. And then he goes down to a thrift store, and this season is all about Bobby finding his new style. We all do it from time to time, but we get to see it here with Wheeler this season.
We're seeing it in real time for sure. Side note, we always give the art department their flowers for what a great job they do with the set decoration. But I have to say, this gym felt really, really small, especially compared to the gym that we see Tony spar in back in season 1. That was my impression. I was a little let down by that. What did you think, Father Malone?
I thought it was fine because it's supposed to be some tiny gym in the middle of the city. And whatever trepidation I had with the lack of grandeur that they usually bring to their other sets, I think they spent most of their attention on the fucking auditorium at the end of this episode, and I think that's much more successful, and so that's more important.
Agreed. I think this was a means to an end, because ultimately this scene is just about the press conference that Benny Foster has in announcing this fight. So it was fine. We're sort of spoiled. We're used to these big, epic sets filled with grandeur, like you say. This was just a little small, but what are you going to do? So Tony announces that this is where the champ goes to train, which explains why it's a different gym than when we saw Tony train at in season 1. And they're there, as I said, for the champ's press conference. Tony admits to the cabbies that he's nervous, and he asks Bobby if he has any tips on how to get over it. And Bobby then proceeds to do this weird loosening up exercise where it entails him shaking his whole body from head to toe.
Convulses. It's, basic weirdness from Conaway. Conaway, at any chance, will be glad to do a weirdo freak out with his whole body and face. And notice every time Wheeler tells a joke and knows he's telling a joke, he will make a crazy face after the punchline.
Yeah.
Is Conaway commenting on the material, or is Bobby Wheeler just that weird?
I like to think the latter, but ultimately it's just him shaking out the sillies. That's essentially, if you've ever told a child, hey, shake out the sillies, that's what he does. But at the end of the day, it's really an excuse for Wheeler to shake that thick mane of hair that he has. And he does it, of course, in spectacular fashion. But Alex witnesses this and suggests maybe hitting the heavy bag instead, which makes Tony feel more relaxed, but results in a vaudeville moment where Alex speaks in a cartoon hoarse whisper from the impact. He says, I feel good. How do you feel, Alex? Never better. Vaudeville. And he takes his seat.
Good Lord.
It's bad.
I've got nothing to say about that joke.
I've said too much about it already. Bobby doesn't understand why Tony's so nervous, because the former champ is 38 years old, and he says, Tony, you can drop him easy. But Tony says he doesn't want to embarrass him. Not only was Benny Foster a great fighter, but he was a great guy. He doesn't want to show him up at the fight. He wants to take it seriously, but he doesn't want to embarrass the former champ.
HP.
Yeah.
We beat up on Banta a lot here. You more than me.
Yeah.
And the reason we do it is because Banta is kind of an aggressive dummy. However, I think on more than one occasion, Tony Banta has displayed that he is deep down a very decent human being. So, I think we're going to see that play out throughout this entire episode, right? He's always trying to do the right thing. And I think his decision when he gets to it is the right thing. But anyway, I just want to give props to Tony Banta, because I know you're just probably going to kick the shit out of him for the rest of the episode.
Let me be clear about this, that all of the shots it's not just me, we take at Tony, it's got nothing to do with his character or his moral compass or any of that. I think he is a good person, and I think he's shown that, especially in comparison to somebody like Wheeler, who is very self-absorbed and he's not empathetic in the least. Tony is a good person. He's just a man child. He just doesn't know any better. He's naive, which is fine, but that shades into a lunk-headed quality, which sometimes rubs me the wrong way. So let me be clear about that. I don't think he's a bad person. I just think he's an idiot. The character is an idiot.
I agree with you on that. Yeah. I'm not saying Tony Danza is an idiot, but I am trying to pick a fight with Tony Danza. So Tony Danza is an idiot, and Tony Banta is not. Hear that, Tony? Gonna get you on this show eventually, buddy.
Vince comes in and greets Tony, and there's some banter. And like I said, I thought Vince comes off more than a little like Coach Pantuso from Cheers, of course. But either way, Vince asks for someone in the group to work Tony's corner, and Alex accepts with not before using this vaudeville exchange where Vince says, "Any of you guys work a fight?" And do you remember what Alex's response is?
Oh my God, I was married.
Vaudeville.
Hello, ladies. That one hurt, actually. That lost them a yellow light. Just spoilers.
The champ comes in and he's flanked by two gorgeous women.
Are they? I'm not besmirching these actresses or anything, but you just said gorgeous, and all I'm thinking is Elaine Nardo's in the room, so these two are all just automatically dimmed by comparison.
Let me correct what I just said. They are your typical fighter arm candy. That make more sense?
Yeah.
And I think they even allude to the fact that they're supposed to be cheap looking. But according to the Lovey's book, Taxi, the official fan guide, which I've referenced on many occasions, Benny Foster is played by real-life welterweight fighter Armando Muniz, who coincidentally, twice fought fellow Taxi boxer Carlos Palomino, who longtime listeners will remember he played Carlos Navarone, the boxer who played that terrible trick on Tony in season 1. Tony and Benny are introduced. And after some pleasantries, Benny introduces Tony to his arm candy, which prompts Tony to basically grab Nardo by the arm and yank her over there and say, "Hey, this is Elaine, my friend." And she does this thing where she takes her jacket off of her. She acts like a cheap sort of arm candy type of woman, right?
Bimbo.
She acts like a bimbo, right? So it's all very cute, and it's all.
Gotta bring that word back.
Bimbo.
Bimbo. Remember there was himbo for a while? Anyway.
Oh, yeah. The press conference starts in earnest, and the champ talks very candidly about why he's coming out of retirement. No one knows. Why is he coming out at age 38?
Is it for money? Is it for the girls? Is it for the fame? Yes. Da-da-da-da-da-da. Ha-ha. Good one, champ.
I thought he did a really good job. I mean, the man isn't an actor.
No. I wasn't making fun of his performance. I was making fun of that material as written. It was like, here comes the punchline from 20,000 leagues under the sea.
That shows what a nice, warm individual the champ is. As Tony said, he's recognized as one of the nicer guys in the fight game. And that's, they did a good job of.
How nice is he? We'll find out.
That's true.
This is not a nice move he pulls. This is the most bullshit move anyone could ever pull on anyone ever.
Tony was sucker punched basically before the fight even begins, because the champ, Benny Foster, talks about how he was inspired to come out of retirement by a little kid named Brian Sims. And he asks Brian to come in, and a little boy in the smallest wheelchair ever wheels into the gym. And
squeakiest, smallest, squeakiest wheelchair ever.
It's true. And Foster bends down and says that
he should have had a cup in his hand.
Foster says he's the kid's hero, and they became close after the boy rode him from the hospital. And apparently Brian has another big operation coming up, and Foster is coming out of retirement to inspire Brian. Brian inspired him So he's going to inspire him right back. And this fight is for Brian. And at this point, all Tony can do at this point is painfully hang his head while the cabbies frankly look on in horror because they can see what this is all about. And the scene, I thought the scene ended with a nice touch where Tony awkwardly shakes Brian's hand from the wheelchair while the screen does that thing where it develops into a photograph, a freeze frame photograph, which I thought was a nice touch.
I said this was the most bullshit thing of all time. Like, you get to fight the champ, hooray! But you have to lose because the champ is winning for a disabled child or, kid with he's fine. This kid's going to end up being fine. Spoilers for like a million years in the future, everybody, but the kid's going to be okay.
He's going to be fine. The kid who shares Tony's same hairstyle is, to no one's surprise, he's Danza's actual son, Mark Anthony Danza. And according to the Lovey's book, it all started when, actually, before I say that, have you heard this story about how he got the job, Father Malone?
I'm sure his agent put him up for, no, I'm assuming Danza got him a job.
Yeah, so according to the Lovey's book, Mark was out with Tony and Mary Lou Henner. They were dating at the time, and they were out to dinner. And apparently, Mark did a great impression of Louie, while Tony and Mary Lou were just amused as all get out at this kid doing this impression. And then Tony then had him do the impression for the Taxi crew, and everyone loved it. And then eventually, during a taping, a light circuit. Now, this is all according to Tony Danza, so take it with a grain of salt. Apparently, a light circuit blew during the show, and Mark was drafted to once again do his Louie impression for the audience while they fixed this lighting issue. And eventually, Ed Weinberger with the period offered to have Mark do an actual show. I'm not going to be critical. The kid does fine. He's at
fine.
The time he was probably 10 years old. He's fine.
Actually good. He's as good as any 70s kid, He suffers from the precocious thing, but that precocious thing is because they've written his character way above a child's level. I think he does great. If you didn't tell me he was Danza's kid, I would just assume he was another working actor.
You've just gotten to the heart of what I will eventually be critical of in this episode, which is part of it is the precociousness of the kid. It just drives me nuts because that was such a prevalent type on television, especially during that time. You had shows like Facts of Life, Different Strokes, whatever. Every kid had an edge to them.
About Willis.
It just that I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now. But that's no criticism against Mark Anthony Danza. I thought he was fine. The character as written is what drove me nuts. Nevertheless, we get back from commercial. We go back to the garage just after this press conference. The cabbies are all gathered around the table, consoling Tony. Tony is despondent about having to fight the champ under these circumstances. Louie strolls in, letting Tony know that he made the afternoon paper, which is frankly kind of quaint because that was a time where the paper was still meaningful, not like now where print is dead. So it was a big deal for Tony to have made the afternoon paper.
It's a huge deal, and it's a New York paper.
Let's not forget, boxing back then was a much bigger deal than it is now. This was a time I remember my father followed boxing, and this was, you knew who the champ was at this time. Like it was Sugar Ray Leonard or Marvin Hagler, Mike Tyson.
Marvelous Marvin Hagler.
Let me ask you, do you know who the heavyweight champ is right now, today?
It's not Mike Tyson.
No, I don't know who it is, and I doubt many of our listeners will know who it is. So again, this is another, like I said, quaint reminder of yesteryear where these things actually mattered. Louie can't help mocking Tony. He's loving this because he knows exactly what the dilemma that Tony is facing with this fight. It beat the champ and break the heart of a sick little kid. And Tony stands up eventually and declares that he's going to donate his kidney to the kid. But according to Alex, the kid already has a donor, which it's nice that they clarify what's wrong with the kid because they don't actually say what his operation is all about. But evidently he has to have a kidney donated.
He'll be fine, everybody. He's okay.
Spoiler alert, there's going to be another episode that focuses on this kid. He's fine. He's not even in the wheelchair anymore eventually. So let's not worry too much about this kid, Ryan. Then we get into a thing. This might be my favorite part of the whole episode, such as it is, where Louie takes a lot of glee in explaining to Tony how happy he is to bet on Tony's fights, because he says it's like a trip to the bank. And as he's talking about this, he's recounting specific items in his house and that he bought with fight winnings. He's in what they remind him of. He says, I look at my sofa and I see the Rodriguez fight, and I look at this and I think of the Elliott fight. So everything in his house, he's furnished the house with winnings from Tony basically losing, right?
I think he would be nicer to Banta, considering he's got all this stuff based on him. You know, he'd give him better shifts and continue to encourage his boxing career, because apparently he's just printing money.
He's a sure thing. He's so bad. Louie says he's earmarked the Foster fight for a brand new 23-inch color TV with remote control.
Oh my God, it's living in the future.
Right?
23 inches? Jesus. Where will it go? How would it fit? Oh my God, you'd be blind.
So Louie summons Jeff to deliver $500 to his bookie to place a bet on Benny Foster. Actually, he ups it to a 27-inch TV. He gives him an extra $100. Now, I alluded to this earlier. Just what would a TV set with those approximate options cost both then and in today's money?
Ooh.
What do you like?
It's like
Just
Price is Right.
Yeah. What do you think? How much would it have cost back then? 20. Let's call it 25-inch.
Okay, somewhere in between the two there then. 25-inch television in 1979. Oof.
1980.
This was filmed in 79, and it aired in 1979. I'll say $2,500.
In today's money?
Then money. Yeah.
$2,500 in 1979 money? That's a lot.
Yeah, it's like a car, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay, never mind. $750.
You're closer than I thought you would get. So
okay, well, I want to be the next contestant too. $1. And then I'll be the third contestant, $752. But none of them have realized that there's another contestant who's going. No, go ahead.
So I found a Kmart ad from 1980, and there was an ad for a 25-inch GE console TV. Now, this is one of those console TVs that's more wood than it is television. You probably remember this too.
We owned a few, I believe.
Right? Color TV with remote control. In 1980, this would have cost you $668 for this television.
Oh, contestant number 2.
Come on down. But in 2024 dollars, it would have cost you approximately $2,541.87, which comes out to a cumulative rate of inflation of 280.5%. Now, in a final comparison, today, that amount of money, Father Malone, would get you a 75-inch 8K smart TV with all the bells and whistles.
Wow.
Right? That's a big ass TV.
That's like a wall as opposed to this fucking picture tube nonsense jammed into a credenza.
And not to mention TVs, those tube TVs back then were fucking heavy, man. They were, it was no joke to say they were probably over 100 pounds. Some of these TVs, they were so heavy, man.
We had one that was a TV and a phonograph combo. So you would slide open the top of this thing and there'd be a record player recessed inside. Then I think you could actually pull up to the top and play it up on top, but it would play just as easily while lowered into the console itself.
So it was one of those ones that's longer. It's almost like a bench, like a system.
Yeah.
Boy,
those were the days when furniture was heavy and huge.
Today, televisions, for lack of a better term, they're more disposable, right? I mean, you can go to Walmart and get a nice TV for not much money. But back then it was like buying a piece of furniture for your house, right? It was all wood, nicely ornately done up and dark wood. It was great. I never had one like you describe, although I did see it at friends' houses, but we had a Zenith that it didn't even have remote control. You had to get up and flick. I mean, I'm old, clearly, but yeah, you had to get up and change the station. As the cabbies try to console Tony, he bemoans the fact that, and that, this gets very much like heavy-handedly like Rocky. I feel like that's this thread that runs through the whole show. And that's another thing that kind of irked me because I think they're trying to force that comparison. But he says his whole life, Tony says, since he was 14, no one paid any attention to him. Now he's finally got a fight that he can get noticed, and everyone, including himself, wants him to lose. And then to wrap up the Louie thing, Louie hears this, and then he gets very upset. He says, this changes everything, because his reasoning is Tony is a loser. And when a loser wants to lose, the only way they can stay a loser is to win. Now he figures that he's going to change his whole plan. Now he has to bet on Tony to win the fight. I love the reasoning and the fact that this is a bit of comedy that works, that is not beholden to vaudeville in any way. It wasn't a setup punchline thing. It was this perfectly reasoned thing that it's like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. He reasons that because he's such a loser, when a loser wants to lose, the only way he can stay a loser is to win. So Louie, as I said, has to bet on Tony now. So he radios Jeff and tells him to place the bet on Tony to win. At this point, Tony just decides that maybe he should just pull out of the fight, and that's that. And then this raises the ire of Alex, who
Naturally.
of course, because Alex makes the point that Tony should fight for all, again, this is so Rocky. He should fight for all those fighters that never got a shot. He owes it to these fighters who toiled away in obscurity.
Yeah, and I actually found it rousing.
Judd Hirsch can read the phone book and make it rousing. So it works. But again, I don't know. I was struggling to really get past the Rocky parallels in this. You're not the only one who found it rousing, because Tony found it rousing enough to declare that he has renewed passion to win the fight, which causes Louie to reverse himself yet again. And now he has to put money on Banta to lose again.
Oops.
Right. So now we get what is another in a whole string of remarkable B-roll shots. Now we cut to a twilight shot. This blew my mind, frankly. We cut to a twilight shot of cabs rolling down the street by the Felt Forum, which incidentally, there's a huge billboard for Newport Alive with Pleasure, the cigarettes, completely covering one whole side of a building.
Menthol.
Right. Yummy.
Delicious.
But here's where it gets innovative. And another nice directorial choice, the camera, as this is happening, the camera cranes to the right to give you the impression that the POV is somebody in a cab, and they crane their head. Now we see, as they drive past the forum, it says, there's the marquee says Felt Forum tonight, Benny Foster versus Tony Banta. It's on the marquee of the Felt Forum. I couldn't believe this.
Not an electronic billboard either. It's actually up there on the building.
Nowadays, you might just superimpose, like mat it in. This is there. This is actual letters that have been placed on the marquee as they're driving by.
Even if it were an electronic sign, it would be easier than a bunch of crew members running down there and slapping that on the side of the building so they can get the shot.
It feels like in this season too, all of the stuff that takes place, the B-roll stuff, it's all so much more well-grounded in reality. In the past, we're used to things like never having the same shot of Mario's, outside Mario's, twice. It's always some other bar, and we've made jokes about it. But this is actually a real New York landmark that has the imprint of a character from Taxi. I thought it was brilliant.
Well, I'm sure that first season they were just like, go get us some B-roll, and then here's your B-roll. And so they were just picking and choosing. But this season, I'm sure he was like, okay, go get more B-roll, but we also have these episodes with these specific things, so we need these sorts of shots.
I'm here for it. I love it. I think it's no secret that this show was produced on the West Coast. They're not in New York, but this just makes it feel so much more like they're in New York. I don't know. It just feels so well grounded in the streets of New York now in a way that it wasn't quite there in the first season. That's why I love it. After we see this great marquee shot, we cut inside, and this is what you were talking about. All of the budget that was taken away from the press conference gym went into this scene of them fighting, because we cut inside. First thing we do is we cut inside, and it's a far away, it's a wide shot of two boxers slugging it out in the ring. But I have to say, it's so clearly not actually Tony
Oh, yeah.
and Benny Foster, because in this wide shot, one is in red trunks and the other is in black trunks, but the person in the black trunks is actually African American. It's not Benny Foster, who is Hispanic. But then we cut to a closer shot of Banta and Foster fighting. Banta is in red and Foster's in blue. We cut between boxing shots of them in the ring to various shots of Brian watching in the audience from his wheelchair, and Alex and Vince are in their corner cheering him on. But this is the crazy thing about it is I timed this. The footage of them just fighting and reaction shots goes on for 1 minute and 20 seconds. It's like an eternity. Did you notice that?
There's a thrilling fight going on. What do you want to just do it in 10 seconds? I mean, we would miss all of those softball punches they're slowly throwing at each other, or many of the clenches, or the shaky cam to convince us that there's something actiony going on screen.
It's creatively shot in that you see a lot of close-ups of the boxers going at it, but man, almost 1.5 minutes. It doesn't sound like much, but as you're watching it, it just takes forever to get to anything. The bell rings finally to end the round, and Vince and Alex try to psych up Tony for the next round because he's in the corner. But Tony doesn't even want to talk about it. He's really feeling terrible because he says he can feel Brian watching him as he's beating his hero, Benny Foster, right there in the ring. And the bell rings and they fight some more. But finally, with a right hook, Tony finally knocks Foster down for the count. Instead of cheering the win, Tony won't even raise his glove up in victory. Like the ref tries to get him to raise it and he keeps putting it down.
Poor sportsmanship.
He's so ashamed of what he had to do to this kid's hero in the ring. So we cut to the dressing room, and it's funny because Alex is in there and he's fending off this conspicuously large crowd of reporters. But then again, we know that the big papers have been reporting on this, so maybe it's not such a stretch that they'd have a lot of reporters there to cover the fight.
A man was fighting for a sick child and got his ass kicked in the ring, and it was a former champion. Of course they're there trying to get an interview with Tony Banta. Tony Banta is going to be famous for at least 3 days. I think that's probably the news cycle for a boxing story back in '79.
Probably. Tony is absolutely inconsolable about the win. And Alex offers to bring Brian in to talk to Tony. If for no other reason, for Tony to throw himself on the mercy of, because Alex correctly probably reasons that Tony just wants somebody to apologize to because he feels terribly about this. So Tony agrees, and Alex, he goes off to tell Brian to come in. And Brian comes in to talk to Tony. And Tony is trying to play it off to Brian that he just hit him with a lucky punch, but Brian's having none of it. Brian was there. He watched the fight, and he says he knocked him cold, no question. Just knocked him out. And Tony explains that Benny, he wouldn't have wanted Tony to fight him halfway. This is a man with pride, and he wouldn't want Tony to just get in there and carry him. He'd want him to give his best, and that's what Tony did. Tony even says, look, I don't get that many fights. I have to drive a cab, which the precociousness coming out prompts Brian to exclaim, Benny lost to a hack? I mean, this isn't something that a 8-year-old, 9-year-old kid would say. It's awful.
No. Yeah, it's overwritten, and it's driving the precocious cute factor that seemed to possess every sitcom writer of the 1970s and 80s and 90s and thousands and on and on.
Yeah. Tony at this point just begs Brian for forgiveness, and Brian seems receptive, and he stretches his arms out for a hug. But watch out, Tony. When he bends down to give the kid a hug, what does he do?
This was unexpected. The kid fucking cold cocks him.
He did. Not only did he cold cock him, but Tony reacts so horribly and he says, "What did you hit me with?" The kid took the ball bearings out of his wheelchair and put them in his hand so he could really lay into him.
It's a fucking callback. The thing was so squeaky because the kid keeps the ball bearings out so he can knock people on their ass. He puts them in a little pouch on the side of the fucking wheelchair. That's where he keeps them, just in case he needs to lay out some chin music.
Yeah, this kid's no good. Brian gets into it with Tony. He shouts at him that he knocked out his hero. Brian says, "Do you know how hard it is to get a fighter to come to the hospital? All we get are singers." And now Brian is chasing Tony around the dressing room in his wheelchair until Tony finally offers to become his fighter, to become Brian's fighter, his hero. He promises he's going to come visit, let Brian watch Tony train, and he'll even come to the hospital when Brian has to have his operation. And they agree, and then they finally shake on it. And now we have a bumper on the episode, another bumper.
Is this a bumper or is this like Act 4?
It's a bumper. It's dumb. We cut inside the garage where Tony wheels Brian excitedly into the garage. They've spent the day together or what have you. And after commiserating with the other cabbies, Louie comes over to complain to Tony about losing his color TV. So apparently he did put money on Tony to lose. And by his reasoning, a loser wants to lose, they're going to win. Louie then resolves that he's going to shake down Tony even harder because he cost them money. He's going to make him pay more for messages, for phone calls, everything. I mean, Louie is really being a prick.
If somebody would just bring a tape recorder in sometime, they could end all of this with Louie De Palma.
Get him dead to rights about the awful things that he's doing. I agree, but I don't know. I guess they're used to it at this point, so they'll just take it like chumps. So Brian introduces himself to Louie, and he ingratiates himself like any precocious kid would. He offers Louie a hug, which Louie accepts gladly, puts a smile on Louie's face, and I think Louie even says, "That's a good kid," and he walks away. And Tony
Hey, why didn't you punch that guy? Why you punch me? You don't punch the bad guy. Please tell me, child of mine.
What did he do? He didn't punch
I
Louie.
got his wallet. That's so much better. Da, 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 da. Taxi.
That's the episode. Now, as is our custom, we're going to talk about yellow lights.
What does a yellow light mean?
Just a reminder, we score on a scale of 1 to 5 yellow lights, 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Father Malone, as is also our custom, what do you give The Reluctant Fighter?
I give The Reluctant Fighter 3 yellow lights. But because of the earlier bad joke, I take back 1 yellow light for whose god this cab is.
Really? Okay. That in
Yellow
itself
light.
is that's kind of surprising, actually. Just the 3 I was speechless for, and I would press you on it, but 2 is more in line with what I was thinking. Now, for myself, I gave The Reluctant Fighter 1 yellow light.
Whoa, no.
Oh yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Look,
Because
didn't it feel like it went on forever?
yeah, so that in no way equates to more than 1 yellow light. It's not rewatchable. There's next to zero cabbie interaction or input. The plot is boring, like you said. It seems to go on forever, and Michael Gazzo isn't really even all that funny. I thought he didn't really add much.
Excuse me.
Hmm?
You cannot put Michael Gazzo into the con column of the pro and con with this episode. He doesn't add extra funny, but then he's not given extra funny.
Yeah, it's not his fault, but at the same time, the character did nothing for me. There's no Latka, there's no Reverend Jim. I hated the fact that they made this kid precocious and had an edge to him. I didn't like that, the tough attitude. It felt like different strokes or something. Bottom line is, this episode is not rewatchable for me at all. So 1 yellow light.
You make a good point. You make a good case. I'm sticking with 2 because I got some extra laughs out of this one. This is an episode that featured Elaine Nardo in suspenders. That won't allow me to add another yellow light to it, but it'll keep it firm at 2.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say that she looked the best in this episode than she has probably all season. She was amazing in this. The suspenders thing was
My
unbelievable.
God, I go crazy for that. I don't know. Apparently, that was formative. Not necessarily Nardo, but there was a lot of that at the time. You remember in the late 70s, early 80s?
Oh, yeah.
Women with the shirts and the thing. I know I sound like a pig right now, and nobody needs to hear this, but there you go.
Look, she's a beautiful woman. She knows it. And I don't get the sense that she's being exploited. She's owning her sexuality.
Woman. Yeah, that's right. I'm a feminist too.
2 yellow lights from Father Malone, 1 yellow light from me. That will do it for this episode of Night, Mr. Walters. Father Malone, when you're not clocked into the garage, where can the folks find you?
Well, you can hear me on weirdingwaymedia.com. I have a few shows over there. Dark Destinations, a radio drama I write and produce. And I do I do a show called Midnight Viewing, which actually has 2 separate entities now. The horror anthology podcast, where we're talking about Tales from the Dark Side right now. And there's Anthologies Attack, which has a different topic every week, all anthology related. I think this coming week we're taking a look at Batman, the animated series, Legends of the Dark Knight. It's an anthology about Batman.
Very cool. I would encourage people to check out Dark Destinations. If you love great audio drama, great storytelling, you cannot go wrong, people. Trust me. You can find me on the Weirding Way Network as well. I've done a little bit of work with Dark Destinations with Father Malone, of course, and done a little bit of the music here and there.
A little bit of every piece of music you hear on Weirding Way Media Network is from HP, okay?
Also, I have a Bandcamp site called hpmusicplace.bandcamp.com. Some new material coming there soon, I promise. And so that's, again, thank you so much for listening. Please feel free to subscribe to the podcast, write a review, or rate us. We'd love to hear from you in any way you see fit. So for myself and Father Malone, thanks again, and we'll see you next time.